Sitting on the porch of my new house, I watch the sun setting on the horizon and think about how life comes full circle. My name is Kevin Mitchell, I'm 46 years old and I run Mitchell Constructions, a company I built from scratch nearly 20 years ago. It was at a barbecue at a mutual friend's place that I met Melissa. Her brown eyes and charming smile caught me right away. After 3 months of dating, I already knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. The proposal happened at her favorite Italian restaurant. 15 years ago, we exchanged vows in a simple ceremony with family and close friends. Subscribe to the channel and give a like to get access to more stories like this. The first years were amazing. We worked hard, me at the construction company that was starting to grow, and her, as a marketing manager at a local firm. We bought our first house together, a townhouse in Pine Ridge, a quiet neighborhood where I imagined we'd raise our kids. But they never came. Melissa said she wasn't ready and that she wanted to enjoy our life together a bit more. I respected her decision. Meanwhile, Mitchell Constructions was booming. We went from 3 employees to almost 70. My partner Scott and I built a solid reputation around here. We constructed homes, commercial buildings, and even handled some municipal projects. Those long hours paid off, we achieved financial stability, traveled to various countries, and I gave Melissa a comfortable life. I thought we had built something solid, like the buildings I used to erect, firm foundations, sturdy structure. But relationships, unlike concrete and steel, can have invisible cracks. About 8 months ago, I started noticing small changes. Melissa began going out more with work friends I'd never heard of before. Her schedule became unpredictable. She'd come home late, sometimes wearing a different perfume. One day, when I was looking at our credit card statement, I saw charges from fancy clothing stores and lingerie, things I'd never seen her wear. I thought about asking her, but I didn't want to come off as controlling. Maybe it was just a phase, some early midlife crisis at 38. Our communication, which used to be so fluid, turned superficial. Dinners were silent, and our chats were limited to the weather or the news. Her phone suddenly had a password, something new. When she got texts, she'd step away to answer them. Once, I got home early and caught her quickly hanging up on a call, saying it was just work. The hardest blow came on our anniversary. I had reserved dinner at that same Italian restaurant where I'd proposed. I waited for 2 hours, sending texts that went unanswered. When she finally got home, around midnight, she said she had completely forgotten because of an emergency meeting at work. I apologized for having doubted her. Yes, I said sorry even though a gnawing feeling in my stomach told me something was really wrong. The truth came out in an almost mundane way. I found a receipt from a local hotel in the pocket of her jacket while sorting the laundry. A hotel just 20 minutes from home, with a date 3 days earlier. Confronting her right away felt natural, but something told me to wait and investigate a bit more. I hired a private investigator, discreetly recommended by an attorney-client. Within 2 weeks, I received photos of Melissa checking into that hotel with a younger man, Ryan Thompson, 34, a gym instructor she'd been seeing for 6 months. The investigator even recorded some of their conversations at restaurants and cafes. In one of those recordings, I heard my wife laughing as she said, "Kevin has no idea. When I ask for a divorce, we're going to make sure half of the construction company is mine. The state's laws are on our side." Ryan's voice added, "He built that empire and now we'll cash in on it." Brilliant, isn't it? My world fell apart. 15 years of companionship, or what I thought was companionship, reduced to a web of betrayal and greed. I spent sleepless nights, reliving moments and questioning every memory, every smile, every "I love you" she'd ever said. The pain was indescribable, but something inside me refused to collapse. I didn't show that I knew, I kept acting normally while processing everything and figuring out my next step. Instead of confronting Melissa immediately, I arranged a meeting with Daniel, my trusted lawyer for many years. I showed him the evidence and explained the situation. "Kevin, we need to act carefully and strategically," he said after reviewing everything. In messy divorces, especially ones involving businesses, those who rush usually end up losing. Following his advice, I began organizing and protecting my assets. I gathered all the documents proving that Mitchell Constructions existed before our marriage. I found records of the initial investments made solely with my own money. Daniel helped me set up an irrevocable trust to protect part of my fortune. I transferred some properties to the company through legally sound structures. I wasn't trying to hide assets, everything was done legally, just ensuring that the fruits of my labor wouldn't be unfairly divided. At the same time, Scott and I sped up the finalization of pending contracts and reorganized the company's structure. We presented proposals for new projects, including the Pine Ridge Community Center, an old dream that could finally come true. Meanwhile, at home, I kept up the routine. Dinners, superficial conversations, pretending not to notice when she came up with excuses to go out. It was like acting in a play, knowing that the final act was near. I even started sleeping in the guest room, claiming my snoring was disturbing her sleep. She didn't even protest. On a Thursday, Melissa got home earlier than usual. She was nervous, constantly fixing her hair, a tic she always had when she was anxious. She asked to talk in the living room and sat down formally, as if she were about to deliver some bad news. "Kevin, this isn't working anymore," she said, looking down at her hands. "I think we need a divorce." A heavy silence filled the room as she waited for my reaction. Maybe she expected tears, pleas, or anger. Instead, I felt a strange relief wash over me. The weight of the lie was finally being lifted. "All right," I replied calmly. "Actually, I'm relieved you mentioned it." Melissa's expression changed instantly, from confusion to alarm. "What do you mean, relieved?" she asked, her voice rising. "Melissa, I've known about you and Ryan for months. The meetings at the Westwood Hotel, the plans to take half of my company, everything." Her face went pale. She tried to deny it, but when I showed her some of the photos, her eyes widened in shock. "I've also spoken with my lawyer. The divorce papers are ready, they just need your signature. And I suggest you hire a good lawyer, you'll need one." She quickly regained her composure, shifting from shock to anger. "You can't do this. I deserve half of everything." "Actually, no. I have documents proving that the company existed before our marriage, and evidence of your affair and intent to screw me over. You can choose a reasonable settlement now or a long, drawn-out court process that will expose everything." Melissa stormed out, slamming the door and shouting that I would regret it. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The confrontation I feared had happened, and I was standing tall, stronger than I ever imagined. 3 days after the confrontation, I got a call from Melissa's lawyer, Rebecca Thompson. In a firm, professional voice, she requested a meeting to discuss the amicable terms of the divorce. I agreed immediately and suggested Daniel's office as a neutral spot. The next morning, the four of us sat on opposite sides of the meeting table. Melissa avoided my gaze while Rebecca laid out her initial demands: half the value of the construction company, our house, 2 rental properties, and a substantial alimony. My client sacrificed her own career to support Mr. Mitchell's professional growth, Rebecca argued. She deserves fair compensation for the 15 years of emotional and practical support that enabled him to build this empire. Daniel stayed calm, methodically arranging his documents. "Before we proceed, I'd like to present some relevant materials for these negotiations." He opened a folder and handed out copies of documents proving that Mitchell Constructions was founded 3 years before our marriage. Then he presented financial records showing that the initial capital came solely from my savings and a loan in my name. Now, regarding the claim that Mrs. Mitchell sacrificed her career for her husband, Daniel continued, "We have evidence that she received regular raises during our marriage, moving from junior manager to marketing director with a salary above the market average." Rebecca looked uncomfortable but maintained her ground. Even so, during the marriage, she did contribute to the growth of the company, even if indirectly. At that point, Daniel placed a sealed envelope on the table. "Before we continue with this line of argument, I believe you should review this evidence. Inside the envelope were photos and transcription of conversations between Melissa and Ryan, including explicit plans to use the divorce to get a piece of my company. Melissa's face lost all color as Rebecca examined the material with growing concern. This could be considered an attempt at matrimonial fraud, Daniel explained. It could also significantly affect the division of assets in court if we decide to take the case further. Rebecca asked for a break to speak privately with her client. Through the glass door of the adjacent room, I saw a heated discussion, and Melissa was gesturing furiously while her lawyer kept a firm stance, clearly explaining the legal realities of the situation. When they returned, Rebecca presented a drastically reduced proposal. Melissa would only get the assets she brought into the marriage, plus a modest financial settlement and her current car. I looked at Melissa, who kept her eyes fixed on the table, and felt a mix of sadness and relief. 15 years reduced to a cold negotiation over money. I accept the proposal, but on one condition, I said. I want a mutual confidentiality clause. What happened between us stays between us. Melissa finally looked at me, surprised. Perhaps she expected me to publicly humiliate her. But retribution was never my style, I just wanted to move on. 2 weeks later, we signed the divorce papers. As I watched Melissa leave the notary office, I felt an odd emptiness. A part of my life had ended, not in the way I had imagined, but it was over. Now it was time to rebuild. The first week after the divorce went by relatively peacefully. Melissa removed her belongings from the house while I was at work, sticking to our agreement to avoid unnecessary encounters. I began reorganizing the space, taking down photos and items that brought back painful memories. One Friday, around 11 at night, I was woken up by violent knocks on the front door. I looked out my bedroom window and saw Ryan staggering on the porch, clearly drunk. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but before I could dial, I heard the sound of glass breaking. He had thrown a vase at the living room window. "Get out of here, you coward," he shouted. "You ruined everything. She was mine." I carefully walked down the stairs, keeping my distance from the door. Ryan kept shouting insults, accusing me of manipulating the divorce process and stealing what should have been Melissa's. "Melissa lost everything because of you," he yelled. "Now she doesn't even want to see me anymore." I called emergency services to report a potentially dangerous intruder. As I explained the situation, I heard more glass breaking. Ryan had forced his way in through the back door. When I entered the kitchen, there he was, holding a knife he had taken from my own cutlery drawer. His eyes were red, and his breath reeked of alcohol. "You're going to pay for ruining our plans," he said as he advanced toward me. 15 years of practicing jiu-jitsu as a hobby finally came in handy. When Ryan clumsily lunged with the knife, I dodged to the side, grabbed his wrist, and used his own momentum to throw him off balance. In seconds, he was pinned on the floor, his arm caught in a hold that forced him to let go of the knife immediately. "Don't move," I said firmly. "The police are already on their way." Ryan tried to struggle, but I tightened my grip a little more, making him groan in pain. "This isn't going to solve anything," I said. "You're only making things worse." When the siren sounded outside, Ryan stopped fighting. He finally seemed to understand how serious his actions were. Michael Harris, the chief of police in Pine Ridge and an old friend, arrived with 2 officers. The scene spoke for itself: a broken window, a knife on the floor, and Ryan reeking of alcohol. "He broke into my house armed," I explained as the officers handcuffed Ryan. "I've got everything recorded on the security cameras." Ryan was taken to the station, shouting threats and accusations along the way. Michael stayed to take my statement and inspect the damage. "Are you okay?" he asked, concerned. It could have ended much worse. "I'm all right," I replied, though my hands trembled slightly. "I just didn't expect this kind of confrontation. Kevin, I've known you for years. You've always been a calm guy, respected in the community. Melissa is out there saying you fooled her in the divorce, that you hid money." I showed Michael copies of the divorce documents, including the evidence of the affair and conspiracy. He shook his head, disappointed. "Ryan will be charged with trespassing, property damage, an assault with a knife, he informed me. With his record for drunk driving, he's probably looking at a few months in jail. After the incident, I installed a more robust security system and temporarily hired a surveillance service, not out of fear, but as a precaution. Ryan's threats, even in his altered state, showed that the drama was far from over. At the preliminary hearing in court, I watched Ryan with his public defender. He looked diminished, dressed in his prison uniform, his gaze defeated. Melissa wasn't there. I later heard from mutual acquaintances that she had moved to another state, unable to face the consequences of the life they had built together. Ryan was sentenced to 6 months in jail and faced 12 months of probation. The judge also issued a restraining order, forbidding him from coming near me or my property after his release. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Justice had been served, not out of revenge, but because the legal system worked as it should. It was time to truly turn the page. With the divorce finalized and the Ryan incident resolved, I threw myself into work as a way to heal. The Pine Ridge Community Center project became my main focus, a complex that would include a library, spaces for cultural activities, and a recreational area for kids. It was exactly the kind of meaningful project I needed. At a meeting with the city to present the preliminary plans, I met Amanda Wong, the architect hired to oversee the project. Smart and direct, she didn't hesitate to point out flaws in my initial design. The flow between spaces doesn't really encourage community interaction, she remarked as she quickly redrew part of the layout. If we rearrange it like this, it creates more natural meeting points. I was impressed with her vision. Over the following weeks, we worked together to refine the project, spending long hours discussing every detail. Amanda was 39, divorced for 3 years, and had no kids. Her passion for social architecture, creating spaces that truly serve people, was contagious. Construction isn't just about physical structures, she told me during one of our working lunches. It's about creating environments where life happens. That perspective deeply touched me. For years, I'd focused on the technical and financial sides of building. Amanda reminded me of the greater purpose: we build places where people experience life, create memories, and form relationships. At the same time, I renovated my house, not just getting rid of traces of Melissa, but transforming it into a space that reflected who I really am. I painted the walls in colors I've always liked, even though Melissa once said they were too masculine. I turned the guest room into a real office. I set up a reading nook in the living room with the bookshelves I'd always wanted. I also reconnected with old friends who had drifted apart during the marriage. Dinners with friends, Sunday golf games, cooking classes I'd always been curious about, each small choice was an exercise in rediscovering who I was. My therapist, Dr. Castro, whom I started seeing right after the betrayal, helped me work through my anger and disappointment in a healthy way. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference, she reminded me. Your goal shouldn't be to hate Melissa, but to reach a point where she no longer has power over your emotions. In our sessions, we tackled not only the betrayal but also the patterns I repeated in relationships, like my tendency to take on responsibility for other people's feelings, always putting their needs ahead of my own. Gradually, the wound began to heal. I started waking up without that heavy feeling in my chest. I could think of Melissa without a surge of anger or sadness overtaking me. The happy memories of our time together weren't erased, but reinterpreted as part of my journey. As the community center project advanced, my relationship with Amanda naturally shifted from professional to personal. Our working lunches turned into dinners and weekend walks. Unlike the quick, intense beginning I had with Melissa, we built something slowly, based first on mutual respect and shared interests. I love your pace, Amanda said when we finally talked about where we were headed. We're not rushing or forcing feelings. We're just being genuine with each other. That authenticity was refreshing. There were no games or unspoken expectations. We talked openly about our pasts, our fears, our hopes. When I invited her over to see my renovated house, she brought a small bonsai as a gift. To symbolize patient, careful growth, she explained. I placed the bonsai by the window in my office so I could see it while working. It served as a daily reminder that the best things develop naturally, with time and care. When the land for the community center was finally approved and we broke ground, I felt like I wasn't just building a new building, but a new version of myself, stronger, more authentic, and surprisingly more compassionate. 1 week before Ryan's probation was up, I got a phone call from the officer in charge of his case. "Mr. Mitchell, Ryan Thompson will be released next Wednesday," Officer Peterson informed me. "According to the restraining order, he has to stay at least 200 meters away from you and your property. But I thought you should know he's been having trouble finding a job because of his criminal record." I thanked him for the call and hung up, lost in thought. Despite everything that had happened, I didn't feel any satisfaction knowing Ryan was struggling. As strange as it sounds, even to me, I felt a bit of compassion. Desperate people make desperate decisions, something I learned over my years in business. That night, during dinner at Amanda's place, I shared the news and my thoughts afterward. "I'm considering something that might sound crazy," I confessed. "I'm thinking of offering Ryan a job at the construction company." Amanda looked surprised and carefully set her fork aside. "The guy who broke into your house with a knife? Are you sure about that?" "It wouldn't be at the head office or on projects where I'm directly involved," I explained. "Scott oversees the works in the northern part of the city. Ryan could work there, starting with basic tasks." "What makes you want to help him after everything?" she asked, her tone more curious than critical. I thought for a moment before answering. "Part of it is practical. If he has a job and becomes stable, he's less likely to cause problems. But it's more than that. I kind of understand what it's like to lose everything and have to start over." Amanda reached across the table and took my hand. "It's a generous decision, but you need to think through all angles: your safety, how the employees might react, the risk for the company." Over the next 2 weeks, I made a careful plan. I first talked with Scott, my partner, who initially thought the idea was absurd but eventually agreed after we hashed out the details regarding safety and supervision. Then I met with Michael, the chief of police, to ensure there would be no conflict with the restraining order. "Technically, if you're offering the job voluntarily and he'll be working in a place you don't go, it doesn't violate the order," Michael explained. "But I'd suggest putting everything in writing, with witnesses." Finally, I scheduled a meeting in a neutral location, a room at City Hall, with Ryan, his probation officer, and a legal mediator. Michael insisted on being there as a precaution. When Ryan walked into the room, I was taken aback by his appearance. He looked like he had aged years in just a few months. Deep bags under his eyes, a slumped posture, stubble covering his face. He was wearing a faded shirt that looked too big for his now thinner frame. "Thank you for coming," I began formally. Ryan nodded, tense and avoiding direct eye contact. "I'll get straight to the point. Mitchell Constructions is offering you a position as a construction helper on the Riverside Heights project. You'd be supervised by my partner, Scott Lawson. The salary is competitive, with potential for growth based on your performance." Ryan finally looked at me, suspicious. "Why? Why would you do this for me after what happened?" "I'm not doing this for you," I replied honestly. "I'm doing it because it's the kind of person I choose to be. I believe in second chances, since I needed one myself. This is a legitimate job opportunity, not charity or a trap." The probation officer then explained the terms. Ryan had to stay sober and attend AA meetings as part of his conditions. Any violation would result in immediate termination and possibly sending him back to jail. The job would start in the finishing department, away from dangerous tools, until he could prove his reliability. Ryan listened quietly, nervously rubbing his hands on his knees. When everything was laid out, he finally said in a low voice, "I don't deserve this. I tried to hurt you. I helped Melissa plan all of it." "We all make mistakes," I replied. "Some bigger than others. The question is what we do afterward." After discussing a few practical details, Ryan signed the provisional work contract. Before we left, he looked me in the eye for the first time. "I don't understand why you're doing this, but thank you. I won't waste this chance." On the way back to the office, I reflected on my decision. It wasn't just about Ryan or a desire to feel morally superior, it was about the kind of world I wanted to build, one where people could find redemption after their mistakes. Even if I could contribute just a small brick to that greater structure, it was worth it. That evening, Amanda showed up at my house with a bottle of wine. "To celebrate your act of courage," she said, giving me a gentle kiss. "Few would have the strength to do what you did today." Sitting on the porch under the starry sky, we toasted not only to generosity but also to true freedom, the kind that comes from choosing your own path, regardless of the past. A year had passed since Melissa filed for divorce. Autumn returned to Pine Ridge, painting the trees in shades of red and gold, just like on the day that changed the course of my life. The Pine Ridge Community Center was about to be inaugurated, a modern and inviting building that had already become a landmark in town. Amanda and I walked around, checking the final details before the opening ceremony scheduled for the next day. "It's amazing how the reading room captures the natural light," Amanda commented as she ran her hand along the polished wood of the bookshelves. "The kids are going to love this space." I watched her with admiration. In the past few months, our relationship had evolved into something solid and genuine. Unlike what I experienced with Melissa, there was no constant pressure to prove myself. With Amanda, there was a true partnership where we both could simply be ourselves. "The mayor confirmed he'll be there tomorrow," I mentioned as I checked my phone. "And the local newspaper wants to do a special story on the center's impact on the community." As we wrapped up the inspection, Scott showed up with some documents for my signature. After we sorted out the paperwork, he casually mentioned, "Ryan's doing surprisingly well on the finishing team. He has a natural talent for detail work. Johnson is even considering moving him up to the interior design team." I nodded, satisfied. The decision to give Ryan a chance had proven to be the right one. Over the past 8 months, he had shown dedication, punctuality, and a genuine desire to rebuild his life. We rarely saw each other, respecting the restraining order that was still technically in effect, but through Scott, I knew he was sober and focused. When leaving the center, I noticed a familiar figure in the parking lot, Melissa. She was leaning against a car I didn't recognize, seemingly waiting. Amanda squeezed my hand lightly, a silent gesture of support. "Do you want me to wait in the car?" she asked gently. "No, it's fine," I replied. "There's nothing to hide." We approached Melissa. She looked nervous, thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under eyes accentuated by heavy makeup. "Kevin," she greeted, forcing a smile. "You look good." "Thank you," I replied politely. "This is Amanda Wong, the architect in charge of the center project." Melissa nodded to Amanda, clearly uncomfortable. "I heard you came back to town," I commented in a neutral tone. "Temporarily. I came to settle some pending matters." She hesitated, as if choosing her words carefully. "I saw the article about the community center online. It looks impressive." "It's opening tomorrow," I informed her. "An important project for the whole community." There was an awkward silence before Melissa finally said what sounded like her true reason for being there. "Kevin, I made a terrible mistake. These months apart made me realize how much I screwed up." She shot a quick glance at Amanda and then faced me. "I think we could try again. I learned my lesson." The proposal caught me completely off guard. For a moment, I was speechless, noticing Amanda tense up beside me. I thought about everything we'd been through, the lies, the betrayal, and the plans to financially exploit me. "Melissa," I finally said, "I appreciate your honesty, but our story is over. There's no going back." Her eyes filled with tears, though I sensed more frustration than genuine sadness. "Is it because of her?" she asked, gesturing toward Amanda. "Or you just can't forgive me?" "It's not about forgiveness," I explained calmly. "I forgave you a long time ago, not for you but for me. But forgiving doesn't mean going back to the way things were. I'm in a completely new chapter of my life now." Melissa wiped away a tear and quickly composed herself. "You've changed," she observed. "We all change," I replied. I sincerely hope you find happiness on your new path, Melissa. On the drive home, Amanda stayed silent for a few minutes before asking, "Are you okay?" That must have been intense seeing her again. I thought about it as I drove, the city lights beginning to twinkle in the dusk. Oddly enough, I'm perfectly fine. A year ago, that encounter would have shaken me to my core. Today, it was just a closed chapter. That night, sitting on the porch of our home, Amanda and I watched the stars while sharing a bottle of wine. I had accepted her invitation to live together just 2 weeks ago, a decision made with calm and certainty. "You know what impresses me most about you?" she asked, her fingers intertwining with mine. "Your ability to turn pain into something constructive. Many would have become bitter after what you've been through." I thought about the community center opening the next day, about Ryan rebuilding his life, my company thriving, and the healthy relationship I now enjoyed. "I think Melissa's betrayal ended up being the best thing that could have happened to me," I admitted. "Not because of the pain itself, but because it forced me to discover who I really am." Amanda smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. "To truly build something solid, sometimes you have to tear down old structures," she mused, always with her signature metaphors. The next morning, hand in hand with Amanda, we cut the ribbon at the inauguration of the Pine Ridge Community Center. As the crowd applauded, I spotted Ryan discreetly in the background, next to Scott. Our eyes met briefly, and he nodded in silent acknowledgement. Watching so many people gather to celebrate something we built together, not just a building, but a space of possibilities, I felt deep gratitude. Life hadn't turned out as I planned, but the outcome was infinitely better than any plan I could have made. When the ceremony ended and guests began exploring the new center, an elderly gentleman approached, leaning on his cane. Subscribe to the channel and give a like to get access to more stories like this. "Great work, man," he commented, looking at the building. "You know what we say in woodworking? It's not about the hammer, but the hand that holds it and the purpose that guides it." I smiled, recognizing the wisdom in his words. In the end, it's not the circumstances that define our story, but what we choose to build from them.